I'd like to call to order the special called meeting of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen on June the 6th. At this time, I'd like for the city recorder to call the roll.
Yes, I will. Special call. You and each of you are hereby notified that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the Beer Board of the City of Tullahoma, Tennessee are hereby called to meet in a special session on Monday, June 6, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. at the Municipal Building located at 201 West Grundy Street in Tullahoma, Tennessee, for the purpose of considering the following. 1, ordinance number 1578, an ordinance of the City of Tullahoma, Tennessee, adopting the annual budget and tax rate for this fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2022, and ending June 30th, 2023, for the passage on the first of 3 readings. And number 2, for the purpose of transacting any other business that may lawfully come before the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and waive any and all irregularities of the same. Roll call. Mayor Noes.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Blanks.
Here.
Alderman Almacher. Alderman Berry.
Here.
Alderman Blackwell.
Here.
Alderman Dunn.
Here.
Alderman McGee.
Here.
6 present, and I'd like your signatures before you leave today on the document. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask Alderman McGee to do the invocation and lead us in the pledge of the flag. Please stand.
Father, we thank you for every seat that has been filled here today. For each mind and heart that feels the presence of this room, we thank you. Only you truly know what we are setting out to accomplish on this evening. Your righteousness transcends all our efforts and understanding. Forgive us for our pride, the pride that puffs us up and the pride that threatens to unqualify us. Strengthen our confidence in who you have made us to be. Set us free from comparison in order for us to work together efficiently and effectively. Help us to act with character and conviction. Help us to listen with understanding and goodwill. Help us to speak with clarity and restraint. Give us a spirit of service. Remind us that we are stewards of your authority. Guide us to be the leaders that our city and citizens need. Help us to see the humanity and the dignity of those who disagree with us and to treat all persons with the reverence your creation deserves. And finally, bless this meeting today, all those present, as well as the lives of those we will encounter afterwards. Ready us to make every moment count. It's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Alderman McGee. Okay, you have heard the call for the meeting this evening, and that's to act on the ordinance number 1578, an ordinance of the City of Tullahoma, Tennessee, to adopt the annual budget and the tax rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2022, and ending June 30, 2023. This is for passage on the first of 3 readings. I'd entertain a motion. Moved and seconded by Blackwell. And with that, I'd like to ask our city administrator to give us a background.
Yes, tonight I have provided for each of you a list of some budget highlights, just to supplement my presentation from our last regular meeting. This is a list of maybe some of the more detailed items that might not be as visible to you as you look through the budget ordinance. First and foremost, our priority, I think, this year has been to respond to the significant rise in the cost of living and make sure that we are taking care of those employees that truly carry out the services that we provide to the citizens. And so as a part of this proposed budget, there's a cost of living adjustment and of 5% and an annual step increase, as we have always funded since the pay plan was adopted in 2016. And then according to best practices, when you look at your pay plan, you should do a full compensation study every 5 years to make sure that the increases that you're giving along and along are staying competitive with the market. And so in the human resources section of the budget, you'll see we have provided funding for a full compensation study. Our second priority is to continue providing and even enhance our excellent services. Some of the things I've highlighted for you are that we've increased our training budget for the Tullahoma Police Department. We also have enhanced the fire department. Now we're heading into our 4th year of an advanced EMT incentive program. As you've seen, especially I know when you look at our monthly reports, you see how over 80% of our calls are medical calls, and they're an increasing percent of what our fire department's responding to in terms of emergencies. And Chief Pearson just let me know, currently we have 9 advanced EMTs, all as a result of this incentive program, and 12 EMTs. So we are funding that again. We will be implementing Office 365 fully this budget year, and we're adding a new position of IT support specialist. This is not a new funded position. I'm actually thankful to our finance director. With her staff, she's had a vacancy that she's going to leave unfilled and allow me to transfer that funding to hire this IT specialist that will help all the city departments and support them. So we're excited to do that in this budget. 2 other changes in net positions. Public Works requested, they requested just 1 full-time person that would be split 50-50 between recycling and cemetery. What we decided to do instead is provide that funding, but then also transfer part-time salaries to make that 2 full-time positions, 1 full-time in cemetery maintenance and 1 full-time in recycling, which I think better fits our actual needs. So that will be a positive. We've increased funding to support more rabies vaccinations at our animal shelter. They also asked for a mower and weed eater so that they could do their own maintenance around the facility and not have to rely on Public Works or park staff to come to the animal shelter. We have increased funding for street sign replacements. We actually did that in this current year budget, but we're maintaining that higher level of funding going into next year, so I wanted to make sure that you knew about that. And then we've increased funding for more recreational programming at both community centers. We have hired Aaron White. I don't know if all of you have met him yet, but he's our program coordinator working out of both community centers. And we are currently advertising for an athletics coordinator to help run our leagues. Priority number 3 is supporting job creation, new business development, land development, and a vibrant economy. We'll do that this budget year by adopting a 5-year capital improvement plan. That'll come to you shortly after adoption of the budget. And you've already approved a spending plan, but that capital improvement plan will include the spending plan for the rescue dollars. We are increasing the Tourism Council and Downtown Council's budgets from $15,000 to $20,000 each. And we're anticipating hotel motel tax growth that will increase contributions to tourism and cultural organizations by 10% in this budget. So I think they should be very pleased with that. We'll also be beginning our first year of implementation of the comprehensive land use plan upon its adoption just here in a few short weeks. And we have had a reorganization in Parks and Recreation. One of the things it did is create a full-time city forester position, and we've increased the budget for the Memorial Tree Program. It's had a lot of renewed interest here in the last year or so, so we increased that. And then I just named some other highlights for you. I think everyone's really pleased to hear that there's no proposed property tax rate increase in this budget. We have been so fortunate to see our tax base grow by 2.3%, I think is the exact number, Sue. And because of that growth and because of our continued sales tax growth, we're able to offer a lower property tax rate. So Coffee County and Franklin County both went through the reappraisal process this year, and the state has recommended a new tax rate 47 cents lower than it is today. It's close to a 20% decrease. So I think we can celebrate that. I wanted to point out to you that in this budget ordinance, you don't see a list of capital projects, but those will be presented to you in detail for second reading. Also, just some across-the-board increases. We did look at cost of fuel across the board and put a 20% increase. We increased anywhere in any of the departments where we're buying chemicals, uniforms, repair parts for vehicles or equipment. Our utility bills are anticipated to be up about 5%. We also are looking at a 3% increase in the cost of solid waste disposal. You'll see that under landfill costs. And anticipating 8.6% higher cost for mulching and grinding of brush. If you remember, we're currently advertising for those bids.
We opened bids today.
Okay, so we'll look at, I guess for second reading, if 8.6% is enough. Also, I always like to remind you, we have been designated, Tullahoma is a great American defense community. And as a part of that, we've been invited to a reception and conference out in Phoenix, Arizona. So we put money in the budget for some members to be able to send a good contingency of people out to Phoenix for that event. And then I am very proud to say this is something that Sue Wilson and I have kind of collaborated on and wanted to do a better job of upfront funding of some vehicles and equipment in the budget. Many times we've taken the approach that we haven't funded any vehicles or equipment at this time of the year. We've waited until about 4 or 5 months of actual revenues are received and then come back in and amended the budget to fund it at that time. But I put a list here of some of the major items that we're going to be able to fund as of July 1st. A lot of equipment for the police department, including replacement of 3 patrol vehicles. That's the minimum that we try to replace every year. The fire department, I really appreciate their work. They have a lot of expensive pieces of equipment, and they do a good job of breaking that up into 3 or 4 or 5 year programs to help us be able to afford the replacement. So we're starting the first year of a 3-year replacement of their turnout gear in this budget. We have AED units at all city facilities and on all fire apparatus, but now we're looking to add 4 additional units to the administration vehicles. That's in this budget. We've put $60,000 aside for new equipment at our community centers, so that could be fitness to replace fitness equipment and other items. $60,000 for public works vehicle replacements. And wanted to draw your attention, we have set aside $300,000 in the building reserve to get started with repairs to this municipal building. So I'll have to put together a proposal and bring you more details on that in the future. Do you have any questions at this time about the budget?
Any questions?
And of course, you can
Alderman
always
Barrett.
reach out to me by phone or email. I'd be happy to meet with you individually.
On the cost of living, that came out to like, was it 425,000 overall increase? Was that? I'm
You know
trying to
what, I
remember
had
from
that
the-
number in my presentation. Do you have
4.
that in front of you?
I don't have the presentation,
Okay,
but
I
I think
didn't
that's
bring
what
it.
it was,
Okay.
which is about 85,000 a percent. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Are we doing amendments? Or are we just asking questions?
This is for passage on the first reading. I think it bears discussion.
I would like for us to consider moving that 5% up to 8.5%.
About 230.
Another 200, I mean, we're only I say only talking another, if we add that another, 3.5%, 297,500. And I know that sounds like a lot, but I mean, if you talk to our employees, we got people looking at Jack Daniels, we got people looking at all these other places around us that are hiring, and we're losing veteran folks. I can't afford ground beef and gas and everything else, and I know that they can't. And at the end of the day, it's the city staff, I think, that they can run without us, really. So I mean, I would, when it gets to amendment time, I would like to propose that we move that to 8.5%. It's just going to continue to go up. I mean, I know that that's still not going to be enough. That's just going to keep rising. I think that 8.5 was from March. I think I just looked at a recent one. It was like 8.9%. And things are just going to get worse. And they are our number one asset.
Yes, Alderman Blackwell.
The question I would have around that, which I completely agree with you, that our staff is our number one asset and taking care of them is priority. But my question for Ms. Moody would be, so I know that also mirrors our public school systems cost of living adjustment, and we try to, I think, typically, if we can, mirror what they're doing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say in the years that I've been here, the school system has actually passed higher raises than
Yeah.
what we have been able to provide. But again, I don't know the ins and outs of their pay plan and where they are. You know, when we asked, Thompson Burris is the consultant that we use for our compensation study, he provided some insight, and across the board in communities, he's seeing between a 5% all the way up to 17%, I think was the highest increase
Okay.
that he had seen. But he said it depends on what type of raises have you been giving year after year. Some pay plans are much more behind than we are.
Okay.
So that's what I would say, is that you put me in a difficult position. I'm never going to say that our employees shouldn't have a cost of living increase that's tied exactly to the CPI. I think that that's a fair way to look at it. What I try to do is look at the raises that we've given. I feel like we're fairly close to market. I thought 5% was what we could afford, but I also knew that we're about to do a cost of living, a full comprehensive look at our pay plan. And what that will do is help show us where we're missing compression. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but employees in similar jobs haven't all served the same number of years or time in that position. And so over time, if you pay new employees, bring them in at a higher rate, sometimes your existing employees start to fall behind, and they compress those salaries together. So that pay study is going to show us where maybe we need to give particular positions in the city a pay increase to widen back out that gap, give them credit for their years of service and longevity with the city. The other thing it'll do is look at all of our different positions in the city and tell us if there are some places we're missing the mark, where, for instance, laborers, I don't know if you remember this, but last budget year, we passed raises, but we also passed bringing up all of the employees that were in that bottom, lowest paid grade in the pay scale, bringing them up one more step. And so, because we felt like we're trying to bring our lowest paid worker up to closer to $14 or $15 an hour to be competitive. So I think this pay plan will show us that. Are there specific positions in the city that are underpaid? If there are some on the flip side that are overpaid, we can never take pay away.
Right.
So I think that's something to think. When you give an across-the-board raise, you're probably going to have some that still miss the mark, they're still too low, and you run the risk of maybe paying some positions that are already at market more than what the market's recommending.
Can you say again when you're doing that study?
I have to ask Ms. Bryce, have we gotten on their calendar yet?
We have not yet.
Okay.
The request is in.
But this year, though? Is that this?
Yes,
Okay.
we've
Okay.
put the funding in this proposed budget
Okay.
to do that study.
Alderman Blackwell.
And then if we see where we're missing, we would be able to go back during this fiscal year, do we think, and readjust salaries based on that? Huh? Or amend the.
It probably depends on when the results of the study come back, but what I was imagining is heading into next budget, we would have the step increase, a cost of living recommendation, and then probably a recommendation for any other adjustments to fund them at that time. So this is kind of a different conversation. It's related to what Alderman Berry is just talking about. Look at the actual cost of living. You know, in years past, it's been a lot closer to 2%, 3%, 2.5%. This is really a high inflationary year, so we're seeing huge numbers. And so I think that's what he's arguing is let's tie the raise actually to the CPI.
I have to say, I agree with Alderman Berry that this is a concern. I think my secondary concern would be if we do this pay increase, do we put employees at risk because some of this equipment is getting higher? You know, like, are we going to cut costs in that way? Where would that $200,000 come from is my concern.
That would be my question
No, yeah.
of our finance director.
That would be my concern, is that right now we have a balanced budget based on the revenues we have without using any more reserves. So our immediate thing would be looking at, are we comfortable using reserves? Sorry.
I don't
Are
think
we
it's
comfortable
on.
using reserves for something that is a repetitive operating function, which we really try not to do that.
Yeah.
So that's what was tight about trying to balance this, what we could do with what we thought we felt comfortable forecasting in revenues. Now, we may know, usually we've had a little better picture around January of what our revenues are if we're having a real good sales tax year, for example. And that's when we've gone back and said, okay, we can do better in equipment, we can do a little better in other operating areas. And we've also known areas that hurt, you know, in terms of if we had ice storms or things like that to deal with. So that's the only concern I would have now in adding anything large, is trying to decide, are we comfortable using reserves? What do we want to do on a funding basis?
Alderman Berry.
I think evaluating January is great. I think looking at the step next budget season is great, but we're talking 7 months away, and we're talking more than that, 12 months away for the step increases, where, I mean, we're going to lose, I believe we're going to lose people. I'm going to make a motion that we amend the budget to, I'm comfortable pulling out of reserve. It's only, we've got, what, close to $8 million in reserve?
Right, we do. We've got good reserves.
Yeah, we've got great reserves. The city's done well, and that's taxpayer dollars that I know that we do want to have funds there in case we have a super bad rainy day, but that money is also there to be spent. And I think that out of all of our causes, our employees are a pretty good cause. You know, if you start dropping veteran employees to, I mean, you can go down the road and make a ton of money at Jack, and they are hiring like crazy. I thought about doing it. And you lose a couple of veteran employees down to Jack Daniels, it's going to cost you more than $300,000 in experience and training, and then trying to find somebody to fill some of those spots where they can go somewhere else, I think is difficult. It may not keep everybody because it may not be enough, but I think that it's a show of faith to the city employees. I'm going to go ahead and motion to amend the budget to include an 8.5 cost of living, and pull that out of reserves.
Okay, we have a motion. We need a second.
Over here.
Is everyone clear on the motion? Alderman Blackwell.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion then on the second, on the motion and the second that we have? So, thanks.
Ms. Wilson, how long have you been the employee of the city of Tullahoma?
20 years?
In the 20 years that you've been the finance director, have we ever had this great increase?
No, but we haven't had this kind of cost of living either.
Right, that would be my follow-up question. But we depend on you for guidance as far as, can we afford to do this? Are we taking too much out of reserves? You know, what's our risk benefit?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know.
Okay. I don't think you're having a bad impact on reserves. I think where you're going to have to watch is just, we're going to want to make sure for next year that we have enough operating revenues to absorb whatever we make into our, part of our operating costs. But no, I think our reserves are solid, and I think our sales tax growth has been extremely good for the past 3 years, and we've got stores coming online too. So economically, I think we're sitting in a good position.
One thing I like to look at, just to add to that, you have to remember that it has a compounding effect. So when you increase the cost of salaries and benefits this year, you have to pay those again next year, plus the step, plus whatever cost of living, you know? So it compounds as we go forward. And I would have to look after this change, but I know in years past, we've been somewhere just shy of 80% of our operating budget is salaries and benefits. I think if we're intentional about what we're doing, there's nothing wrong with taking the position as a city that we want to be the best paid, have the best paid employees, but we're going to run lean because of it. Does that make sense? That I'm not going to be able to add positions to the budget as easily, but I'm going to pay the people I have very well. And a number of other cities do take that approach. I mean, it's just you need to understand that we probably won't be able to add new people to the payroll because we'll be just absorbing the additional cost of payroll.
Alderman Blackman.
Alderman Dunn had it.
Excuse me.
I think this is really important that we're able to pay our employees well. My concern is that if we are not reflective about what we're doing and strategic, we're going to have lifeguards who are paid well above average, and then some of our skilled workers who are not. 8% of one is not 8% of the other. And so we do need to be very strategic. I don't want to just do a blanket, this is going to solve everything type of solution. I think we need to look at what cost is doing and reevaluate this in January. I think a knee-jerk reaction is going to come back to haunt us for years. I do not think this is a good idea at all.
Alderman Blackwell.
I seconded for discussion. I think 8.5% might put us, my question for Ms. Wilson would be, year-over-year growth on sales tax this past year. I'm trying to remember what the total revenue increase was. Do you?
Well, we budgeted for 6%, but in the last 3 years, we've been closer to 8 to 10. We've had some really strong years. And I would hope we would come in about 8%.
But what is
8
that
to 9 this year. That's why we've been able to readjust the budget usually in January, is we've had additional funds for us, additional funds for the school system.
Right.
Because we've had some pretty solid years.
And I'm trying to do the math here. In terms of what that is in dollars and not percentage.
Oh.
Sorry.
So look on page 11.
So I'm trying
And you
I'm trying
have,
to do some math on my phone.
That's what I was thinking.
It is, I mean, I would say that was what, 1.4, 20, no, 800,000. Is that what I'm seeing? From 2021, 22 to 2022, 23, we're expecting about 800,000 in growth. So this would be about, if we're looking at a 3.5% increase, then that is probably about $350,000 and almost half of the growth, expected growth, which seems
Yeah.
Just in sales tax.
just in sales tax, but it's still, you know, and then absorbing that year over year, I worry. I am hesitant on the 8.5. I agree that we need to keep up with cost of living. I think that there's a balance here where we can probably do a little bit more, but also reevaluate in January.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Alderman McGee.
I have two questions. Do we have a lot of turnover now? We don't. We don't. Do we, or do we have a lot of turnover in the city?
Well, we have particular positions that are hard to fill.
Okay.
You know, you have some departments of the city, I don't think turnover is as much an issue as others.
Okay.
We certainly have a hard time finding any part-time positions of any kind. Laborers, drivers are very difficult to keep. Help me, police officers and
Police
firefighters are
officers.
harder to find than they used to be. So, you know, again, I think both concerns, I hear both of you. I think it is valid to look at the way that the labor market is today and say that it certainly would help us to say, hey, we're positioned best. We're positioned top of the market. We've consistently given good raises. This is a great place to work. But I also respect Alderman Dunn's point that that ongoing recurring cost that you're adding, it probably is going to mean that we're taking away from being able to buy equipment, vehicles, do as much maintenance on things. You know, there is only so much new money available year to year, and you have to be intentional about how you're spending it.
And my next question is, I'm sure there's different employees with different certifications. Are those certifications, is that incorporated into their current pay?
It depends.
certified.
So if it is a job requirement, then it wouldn't be additional pay. It would be part of
Part
the
of-
salary when we establish the salary range for that position.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't think there are many that we incentivize. We really only have job requirements.
Okay, because she had mentioned, you know, like lifeguards could potentially make more than, and I know they require several certifications. So that's why I was asking the question.
And I mentioned lifeguard just mainly because they're like a part-time kind
Right,
of, and they're
exactly.
typically, you know, younger.
Teenagers, right.
But, sorry.
Alderman
okay.
Berry.
And I think too, this does add year over year. This is a cost of living increase. This isn't a salary step raise, right? So this is to, as the cost of bread raises, as the cost of gas raises, as your rent may raise, it's to keep you in check with that. The step raises and the salary things that we look at based off of certifications and other pieces, that's where we make sure that a lifeguard isn't making the same as a police chief or grounds crew who's full-time, and so when we go back and we do the studies in January, we can look at that and say, okay, we did give this 8%, 8.5% cost of living separate from the step raises. Now, how do we create that separation there? I think sometimes I've been in places before where they've used the COLA to even out pay and salary, but that's not what it is, and that's not what it's for. And if we don't have the people to run those machines or to do that maintenance, then it doesn't matter how much money we have sitting in reserve to do those things. And if we don't have one of the best managers I ever had, two great managers that influenced me, happy people are productive people. and you will get more. And selfishly, from a corporate standpoint, right, when somebody's happy, you're going to get more out of them. And I think that maybe looking at a lean isn't a bad idea. Maybe sometimes we can get the same amount of work with less effort out of 2 people versus just saying we need 3 people to get the job done. Or maybe we can make this piece of equipment last an extra year, or try to sell it for a higher, but I think that January doesn't help now, and next year doesn't help now.
Any further discussion? We have a motion, we have a second. We have discussion, and we vote green for the approval of that amendment and red for no.
I'm not ready yet. Here, okay, go ahead. Okay.
Oh, I didn't do it? I'm sorry, I thought I did.
Both, go ahead.
Now we gotta,
It's still fails, a tie that fails.
Yeah.
That's what democracy's all about, I guess.
Show me what democracy looks like.
To that point, I hope we're able to re-explore this in January.
Well, we'll have further discussions, no doubt. That is the only thing on our agenda for this evening.
Well, would you
We
need
haven't
to
done
make
the
a
budget.
Well, we
motion?
go back to- I'm
But can we still go discussion on the budget?
someone's ready.
Can we go back to the original budget motion? And we did have a motion and a second on that. Is there any further discussion on the original ordinance? Yes, Alderman Black?
I want to say kudos to leadership for the past few years, because we are looking at lowering our certified tax rate, right, that the state gives us. But like, this is a big, I think people need to know that whenever they say, you guys keep raising property taxes, we're about to lower the rate. Does that mean their property taxes will go down necessarily?
They've had a big
No, if they've had a big bump up, take your appraisals to people. But I think this is a big deal, and I think it's something we should be proud of, which is why I have non-alcoholic grape juice for us to share, because this is a very exciting day for us. If I'm correct, I asked Ms. Moody this morning, we haven't had this low of a tax rate since the 80s?
In 35 years.
35 years.
1986.
And
I've not had this high a property appraisal in 85
And
years.
that's exactly right. That's
We
why we're-
absolutely had ours.
That growth
That's a story I'll tell you
is paying
later.
for it.
But I think that I think to me it shows the leadership from the board in the previous boards as well on ensuring that Tullahoma is growing in a good way. The amount of sales checks we're bringing in, et cetera. So I'm just excited and pretty proud of all of it.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
Put green for approval on the first reading. Red for disapproval on the first reading. And that passes 6-0. And with that, there is no other business. Since there's no other business, we'll
And
adjourn.
I'll take some. Yes, this is what the rosé was for.